Yeah, for everyone who just entered again, this is the What's It Like to Work at a Startup alumni panel hosted by UPE. We have 4 amazing panelists here, and they'll be answering your questions and also answering a couple questions about the experience working at startups, how it differs from big companies, and offer you some insights that they've gotten working at startups or creating their own startups. I'm going to pause the share here so that they can show up in the speaker view. So why don't we go ahead and get started down the line introducing the panelists. So let's answer a couple quick questions. How about in your intro, introduce yourself with your name, when you graduated from UCLA, what clubs or organizations you were involved in at UCLA, and also where you are working now.
All right, I can start. Hi guys, I'm Gopi. I graduated from UCLA most recently, like last quarter, and then before that, I graduated from my master's degree, like spring 2018. No, winter 2018. And then what were the other 2 questions? Where I work? Oh yeah, so I'm gonna start working at Rubrik in a couple of weeks. So yeah, cool.
Did you graduate in fall 2018?
I don't know, dude. It's been a while.
All right. Well, I can go next. Let me first correct Gopi, saying that he did his bachelor's and finished in fall of 2018, and finished his master's.
Calling me out.
Well, okay. Yeah. He finished his master's last winter. For me, I finished my bachelor's in the winter of 2019. I did 1 quarter of master's, and then I decided to stop because that summer I interned at a place called Confluent. We are a startup in the Bay. We work with Apache Kafka, and then I like working there over the summer, and they extended me a full-time offer, so I decided just to return back and start full-time immediately that fall.
So my name's Jorge. I graduated in spring of 2019. And while I was at UCLA, I did foundation 3 times in my first 2 years. Which was
yeah, foundations.
And I was in DevX, founded Mapping, was tech lead, tech advisor. And then I was also in Sigma Pi, the entrepreneurship fraternity. And, so really interested in startups, right? Entrepreneurship fraternity. And so when I graduated, I had a startup job lined up, like a small 30-person company called Affinity that does like CRM software, big in like investor community. But in my last few quarters, I tried to start a company with some of the people I met through the entrepreneurship frat. And so first we started with an education company, making like a chatbot for schools, like a surveying tool. That didn't work out because that tech's hard. So then we switched to looking at video first customer support. Ended up getting into Y Combinator, a good startup accelerator. And I've been doing that for the last 7-8 months. So it's just me and my co-founder in an apartment. Yeah.
Cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Karen. I graduated last spring with a bachelor's, and I work at Rockset. So we're like a 25-ish person size startup in the Bay. We have like our service is a cloud database. So yeah, I work on the back end stuff there. And while I was at UCLA, some of the clubs I did were IEEE engineering ambassadors, which is like the people who give tours of the engineering school. I also did foundations, UPE, and I did DevX as well.
Awesome. Thank you guys all for your amazing intros. You guys all have like a lot of various experiences at UCLA and also during internships and companies. So super excited to get to ask you guys some questions and get to know a bit more about like, working at startups and also your experiences. So like I mentioned just now, you guys all have worked at various different companies from like Facebook to like Google, AT&T, like, and smaller size companies as well. So all the way across the spectrum, you guys like, have experienced like what sort of various companies have to offer. And so our first question on the panel, which I'm sure a lot of people are interested in, like as they're interested in startups, is why did you choose to work for a startup, and why did you choose your company above all the other companies that are out there?
Sorry, I
Okay,
cut out for a minute there. Can you repeat?
Oh, oops. So the question is, why did you choose to work for a startup, and why did you choose your specific startup?
Okay, I can answer that one first. So my goal, I guess, coming out of college wasn't to work for a very large company at first. Actually, like I said I would plan to do the masters, so because I was doing the masters, like that allowed me to do, I guess, one more internship under my belt. If you take a look at like the places that I worked, there's this DNTG that's there, and it was like this really small financial software company. Not what we would consider a startup probably, because they were like kind of that small and their tech wasn't great, but it was kind of that startup feel. And then I worked at a couple big companies like Google and AT&T, which are the complete opposite of startups. So going back to Confluent this past summer was kind of like a reminder for me of like what startup culture was like, and it kind of split the middle ground between the two. Confluent's about 1,000 people, but the startup culture I think is still there because there's just a lot of work to get done, and we have about 150 engineers or so. What I really liked about the culture there was that I was, during my internship, I was working with something new each week. And I joke like whether it was, oh, I've never coded in Golang before, but now I have to learn it this week. And then the next week is now I got to learn Kubernetes. And then after that, it's okay, now I got to relearn all my Scala syntax. And then after that, it's okay, now I got to realize how the heck Kubernetes is going to be working on AWS. And then next week is okay, now what's different for working with Kubernetes on GCP? So that 12 weeks this past summer was like probably the most intense work experience that I ever had. And I think going off of that, what really pushed me to accept my full-time offer then was kind of like the desire, because I really felt like I was learning a lot. Like I with my Google internship, I was doing like a Python test framework. I'll admit I didn't really learn much there, but with the internship at Confluent, that was something where I really felt like it was driving my career. It was really something that I was learning practical industry skills, and I felt like it was just a great way to kind of kickstart my industry career.
Yeah, my story is actually pretty similar to Matt's. Like I was interning at Facebook my junior year, and the work that I was doing there was like, it was like math with a bunch of extra fluff around it. And like I didn't feel like it really prepared me for, or that it would prepare me for like a software engineering job. And the next summer I worked at a smaller company, Rubrik. And Rubrik is a little bit bigger than Confluent, so it's not like exactly a startup either. But we have like around 400 engineers, which and I feel like I having interned there, or having just interned there, I like know a lot of them, so like it's still pretty tight knit. And the work I was doing there was also much more interesting. I had to like implement a variation of TCP for throttling the file upload speeds from like different data stores onto Rubrik servers. And that was like much more impactful than what I was doing at Facebook. So I guess that's like one of the big pros of why you would work at a startup, just that the work you're doing is much closer to like the core product, and like what you're doing is actually used.
I think, just to correct Gopi's statement, not that you can't find good work at like a larger company, like if you end up at
That's true.
Google or Facebook. It's just because there's much fewer engineers.
It's like more likely that you would find work.
Yeah, it's more likely that they need you as an actual resource to really drive something forward. Yeah.
Oh, I can go next. So I also interned at Facebook, and I actually really liked my time at Facebook. I felt like I was pretty lucky. I got like good projects and stuff, and like I enjoyed the culture there. So for me, like I felt like I wanted to go to a startup at one point because like what Matt and Gopi were saying, like I felt like I could like learn a lot at a startup and like really get like pushed out of my comfort zone because yeah, I don't know. I feel like another thing is like going to a startup, like there's going to be a lot of challenges. And I feel like the work-life balance is like definitely going to be worse than if you go to a large company probably. And so I was like, I feel like if I go to a large company, I'm going to like really enjoy it there and like get really comfortable. And then I'm worried I won't be like willing to go back to like small company after that. So I felt like I kind of wanted to just like push myself and then join a small startup like right out of school. Um, and yeah, it's been like a good experience for me so far. I've been learning a lot, working on like some really cool backend systems problems, which is what I was interested in. So yeah.
Yeah, so for me, I thought a lot about like what I should do after I graduate. And so the choice I was kind of faced with was, do I want to work for a big company like, you know, Stripe or Facebook and get paid much more money than working for a startup? So it was like it was a job offer for a much smaller company. Like I said, like 30 people, probably like 100K less. And so that was the choice I was facing. And I decided to choose a startup because in the end, it was about growth for me. And not just growth in like technical skill, but also like seeing how businesses work, seeing how, you know, CEOs operate, you know, like pushing myself to be a leader, you know, like all these things. And I figured money, like you should choose learning over money. Because if you know more early in your career, you can use that to, you know, get more money, whatever you want, happiness in your future, in the future for you. So that's kind of how I thought about it. And I just took that to the extreme conclusion, which is, you know, oh, I can take more money, I can take less money to learn more. What's the next level? It's, oh, I'll just start my own company, learn, like maximize as much as I learn, like get as deep as I can into like every single area of business. And, you know, probably earn zero money, probably fail. But I thought that was, you know, like even if I did fail, I would have learned so much in the first place. And so I'd just be better off for trying. And it ended up working out, so it could keep going. And so that was kind of how I thought.
Yeah, it's really good. And also Y Combinator is like super legit. So congrats. Yeah, so you guys have touched on like a lot of topics of like the differences between startups and big companies, like the main ones being like you feel that the startup companies are able to challenge yourself more in terms of having much more work to do. And then you are one of the core resources of the company to do that work rather than like, for example, more senior people. And you're able to take more leadership because you're able to pick up more of this work and in turn grow more. I think like the next question then is, these are all things that like the smaller companies are able to offer and bigger companies aren't able to offer you. What do you believe are, to make it more specific, I guess, like, and very concrete for all of our viewers, what do you believe are the main core things that a smaller company will offer but a larger company cannot? But on the flip side also, we haven't talked a lot about the big companies. What are some things that you believe that working at the larger company offered specifically that you could not receive in your startup right now?
I can compare them a bit. So like, especially in the climate that we have today, I feel like larger companies offer a lot more stability. Like we saw yesterday in the news that like Lyft had a bunch of layoffs, but like Waymo didn't, right? Because it's backed by Google, which has a lot of resources to pull on. And I guess conversely, smaller companies, like I said before, give you a lot of autonomy. Like if you're like you I guess this is up for debate, but I personally feel like you have more choice on what you can work on. Like, it's true that like they have few resources, so you can't work on like complete moonshots and stuff. But of the work that is available to you at a startup, I feel like you have much more autonomy in a startup than you would at a bigger company where there's like more hierarchy and bureaucracy, which is something to keep in mind.
I think I think another thing that startups have is general skills. Like at Facebook, I worked on, like, Facebook has a data pipelining layer, like data swarm. My team had something on top of that, and then my mentor built something on top of that, and I was working there, right? So each layer has like less documentation, less resources, and is less useful for just anything else I do in programming. But like at a startup, especially my own startup, I'm just using open source technologies. Like I'm building everything myself. I understand everything, so I can build many other different types of applications, like just by myself. And that would be also true if I worked at a small company. I'm like have much more visibility into like each layer of the stack, and there's less things abstracted away.
The skills are a lot more transferable.
Yeah, transferable, useful skill.
Yeah, I think actually to expand on Jorge's point a bit, like at least my experience when I was at Google, I noticed that they had a lot of technologies that they develop in-house just because they're at such a huge scale, right? They actually can't use any of these open source technologies really because it just doesn't operate at the size that Google needs it to be. So like they don't use Git, right? Google uses something called like SitC. I'm actually not even sure about it, but right, like basically they had to come up with their own like code repository thing just because they have that much code. So obviously this probably isn't like a very important like transferable skill like Git knowledge or whatever, but I mean it's just one of those things that when you work at a big company you get specialized into their environment. Not that it's a bad thing, but right, like you have general skills that can be fine-tuned wherever you go next. Whereas at a big company, you might specialize down really well onto one thing that might be hard to transfer over into something else.
So I would, from my perspective, I feel like I've had kind of different view from what has been expressed. Like I feel like in my experience, like when I was at Facebook, I felt like the documentation for stuff I was working with was like actually like pretty good. Whereas at my startup, it's like our code is like super specialized and it's like super technical because like I'm working on the query engine team. So that stuff is like really intense, and basically it was like built by hand by like the two founding engineers. So there's like no documentation because like the code is like constantly changing. So I feel like for me, I actually felt like there was a lot less documentation. It's more like you just like get your hands in the dirt and read the code and try to figure out what's going on. And I would also say in terms of things that like large companies can offer you that startups might not do as well, one big thing would be like more formal like mentorship. Because for me, I was like, when I was at Facebook, like I had my intern mentor, and like when you join full time, like you'll get to like you'll do boot camp, you get to pick which team you want to join, and it's like a lot of different things you can like work on because Facebook works on so many things. And like you'll get like your manager there, and like there's just like a lot of built-in mentorship. Whereas at my startup, like I feel like for me, like I have like a team lead, right? But then basically everyone is like, we don't have any like managers. Everyone is like a software engineer basically. And so like our manager is like the CEO. So there's not as many people who are like there that you can just like ask for mentorship because like everyone's super busy with code. So it's like more onto you that like, you know, you have to like step up and be like, hey, I'm like struggling with this, or like ask questions if you need help. Whereas I feel like at a big company, it's like more formalized. So there's definitely pros and cons to both.
I see that.
And then another point is, I think it's hard to say like this is just uniquely startup. I think it's more likely at a startup is just having people care much more about like the outcome of their project and like really care what happens and the impact, and like knowing that they have an impact. Like at a small startup, like me and my co-founder, or like if I accomplish something that's really valuable, like it's immediately apparent. If you're a small 10-person team, it's immediately apparent. But at big companies, it can be really hard to, you know, just measure impact and feel like you're having an impact. So, you know, people get more disconnected, and, you know, people care less. And so I think at a small company, you get that kind of meaning and like feeling like you're changing something, and like peer validation and all those things. And at bigger companies or teams that don't really have this, you know, you have people who care less, and are just like dragging away, and the work's much more boring. And and on that, like one of the benefits of that is like the work is easier. You do have more time outside of your job. At the small, impactful, where everything matters, you are spending way more time and like have less of a life. So I think that's one factor as well.
Oh, cool. Since I was just talking about the mentorship thing, am I like allowed to refer to questions in the Zoom group chat?
Oh yeah,
Or is there like a process?
I was gonna ask
Okay.
you that anyway, so.
Yeah, okay. I saw that Jeffrey asked everyone about mentorship or getting advice from senior coworkers at large companies versus startups, and what you do when you're stuck on something. So yeah, I feel like I have a good amount of experience with this. So when I was at Facebook, obviously I was an intern, so there's like a lot of mentorship already, but I always felt like super comfortable asking like my intern manager, like teammates for like help on everything, because you're like the intern and it's like everyone expects you to have questions. You should have questions, and like that's all good. And then I started working full time. And I remember from my internships, like one thing that stuck out to me was like one time my intern manager was like, I think like knowing that you've like grown a lot during your internship and that you're doing well is when you don't have to ask as many questions because you're like independent and you can do things on your own. So I kind of took that with me and like tried to apply it to my full-time experience. So the first, I feel like three months, I was like, I basically treated it like, oh, the first 3 months is like an internship, so I can like ask lots of questions. But then after that, I want to be like independent and like not have to bother everyone all the time. And because I was trying to do that, like I actually like struggled a lot because at least the code base I'm working on right now for full time, it gets a lot more complex, and I feel like it's like really, yeah, it's like really complex. But then also like the company is so small where it feels like you have to like understand a lot of it. So I was like trying super hard to like not ask too many questions, and then I ended up just getting like super stuck and feeling really like bad. And then at one point, like the CEO even told me, he was like, oh, I feel like you're doing good, but you can like ask more questions. So I think like, yeah, regardless of like startup or big company, like when you start working full time, you should feel really comfortable asking questions. And like sometimes it's like scary because you're like, oh, I'm full time and now I'm supposed to like know how to do stuff. Like I'm not an intern anymore. This is supposed to be like when I was an intern, everyone knew everything, right? All the full times. But like onboarding, like it's like different like for everyone, and like it also depends on the code base too, right? So I think, yeah, it's like really important to like feel comfortable asking a lot of questions, and like even if you feel like, oh, this is dumb, or like I've asked so many questions, like just keep going, because um, like the company puts like an investment in time to like help you get up to speed and understand everything, and like it's gonna pay off for them later, right? Because you're gonna like know how to build stuff, and then you can help people in the future. So yeah, I would just say like don't be scared to ask. Like I think that's something that a lot of people, including me, were scared to do. So yeah.
I can also talk for a bit about mentorship at a smaller company, like especially as an intern. So yeah, I feel like at a smaller company, like they don't have as many resources as like larger companies like Facebook do. So something that I had to keep in mind was that like so I did have a mentor assigned to me, but like he had his own stuff to do too, and it's not like he had less work just because he had an intern. So I had to like keep in mind that like I couldn't just take up all of his time, right? So I feel like if you're at a small company and you're kind of stuck, you kind of like feel the vibe of the room or like of your team, and then ask people who have like more, or like who have less work at any given time, or if everyone's like busy, which is often the case, and you should like try it on your own to figure it out, and then ask for help, because like you can like if you do ask someone for help, like they more often than not will like interrupt what they're doing and help you. But I also feel like it's important to sort of make sure that this doesn't like drag your team down, because yeah, because your team doesn't have that many resources.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Did anybody else want to tackle this mentorship problem real quick?
Yeah, I'll just add something I thought was interesting. I think so. I worked at Coursera and Facebook, judging those two because I don't really get mentorship now. But between those two, I don't think it was that different asking for advice. Like I don't think there was any big differences. But one thing I thought was cool is at Coursera, like I had show my mentor and ask my mentor about like some specific process or job or something. And he'd be like, oh yeah, like Dan over there wrote it or something. And you could go talk to him. I thought that was cool.
Actually, before we move on to our next question, I'd like to actually ask you as like a startup founder, like an extension of this mentorship question. I'm sure that mentorship is still like very important in the startup world where you create your own startups. Where do you find that you find the most like mentorship from like, or like where do you get your mentorship resources in place of like your coworkers?
Yeah. So yeah, I've been struggling with this recently as I try and build out something that like scales well. And I think what I'm doing is like asking my friends who I know have knowledge about this. One of our investors is like some director of engineering at GitHub or something. So I'm asking him questions, and then like other founders asking them how they doing similar businesses. So yeah, just I would say I don't know how I do it without YC, with like that community, but I mean, online has conferences. That's what I was doing before, just watching conference talks and reading articles. I mean, the best teachers are online already, so.
Mm-hmm. Do you mainly search on like, is there a place that you find these resources online, or is it like mainly just like YouTube?
Yeah. I just search React conference talks and then sort by most popular. Read engineering blogs are pretty valuable. Like, oh, I was like, this company does something similar. I wonder if they wrote a blog post about it.
Let's see. Okay, we do have another audience question that is actually pretty fitting right now, since we're talking about mentorship and developing skills and having impact, and also large companies versus smaller companies. But the question is from Nikki, and it is, do you think it's easier to transition from startup to large company or the other way around once you start your full-time?
So I mentioned this briefly like earlier, but I think for me, I mean, I guess I don't have any empirical data because I haven't done the switch, but I feel like it'd be, at least for me, it'd be easier to transition from startup to large company. Just because like I feel like at a large company, I felt like I was getting super comfortable and I was like, yeah, I have work-life balance and I don't feel super stressed about my work like all the time, or at least during my internship, I thought it was okay. Versus like at a startup, at least my experience like ramping up, it was like super stressful, super not work-life balance. It was just like kind of the opposite. So it's like obviously you should like go from harder to easier. So that's my experience.
Karen was working like all of Thanksgiving weekend.
Oh yeah, so we had a lockdown on my team for November. What does that mean? That means we work every day, even weekends. We went to the office and yeah, that was like not that fun, but it was only 1 month, so it's okay.
I guess expanding on Karen and not in like a more of a not related to work type of thing. Usually larger companies have a few more perks than what a startup can offer. So like you might get 3 meals a day instead of one.
Bro, you basically get breakfast. There's like cereal.
You could invite me to go to dinner with you. I would totally go.
That's a
Definitely
big
Karen.
perk.
Yeah, it's all about how hard it is and like getting comfortable and getting used to a lifestyle where you just don't work that hard. So I think out of college for me, I was looking at it and it's like, oh, I'm already going to do a huge major life shift, like going from college to working life. Like why not shift it more dramatically and go into like entrepreneurship life and like startup life and so I think it's hard to like really get really comfortable, get a really high salary, get at least a lot of luxury. Like there's this great quote from Sapiens that I really like that's like luxury becomes a necessity, which becomes a burden. Right. So like as you get used to this certain lifestyle, it becomes you just can't live without it. And you can't go back to, living in an apartment, not going out, family life, responsibilities start, weighing you down.
Very insightful. So we do have more audience questions, but I wanted to shift the conversation back toward a bit of these prepared questions that I have, just because you guys are talking about some of these topics already, especially the transition from college life to working life, like you mentioned, right? Like there's already the transition between college life to working life for like a normal company, for example, that might have some work-life balance, you know, that you're used to in college, etc. And you're saying that like when you transition to startup life or entrepreneurship life, it can be a more drastic change because you'll be taking more like responsibility or like leadership, you know, right, is the assumption. That leads to the next question, which is, do you believe that the skill set that you would have working at a startup, or do you believe that the startup, sorry, let me backtrack a second. Do you believe that the skills that you would need to work at a startup are a lot different from the skills that you would need at an established company? And could you provide like the details of, if so, how?
Yeah, I think so. Quoting like Sam Altman, who ran Y Combinator for a while, so it might be a little biased, but he said something like he saw someone intelligent, you know, choose like Microsoft over a startup for more money, and he says like in the long term that was a bad decision because you know, you're getting stuck into certain skill sets that may become unnecessary in the future, and you know, like not investing in your personal growth, which will pay off in the long run. So I think that's definitely true. Like that's definitely why I made my decisions.
Yeah, actually, maybe going back to the internship I did last summer, I feel like at least with my role there as an intern, I was able to touch a lot of different things, at least get exposure to a lot of different things that I didn't get from school. More specifically, like there weren't a lot of distributed systems courses when, at least when I was kind of going through. I know there is one now, but like I had already graduated before the first time that class was offered. So I think I picked up a lot of that during my internship, and a lot of it was practical, but actually contradicting point. I think, you know, a lot of companies, they have their own skill sets that they require, right? Every company has a different framework for everything. So as long as you kind of get the theory that you might get from school, I think you're actually pretty well adapted to be able to kind of set yourself up for whatever company you end up joining. Possibly with a startup, since it, I would say, exercises more of like a broader range of different type of muscles. That might, you might feel like you're a bit more prepared for like more generality, but yeah, just study hard in school.
Yeah, I feel like also it really depends on the company, either big or small. So I feel like at a big company, because they have so many different products and stuff, like your skills, like generally, like coming out of school, you'll be general anyways, but like that's like a good fit because they have like variety of projects. Usually you can like kind of choose the one you like and it works out. And then with startups, like some of them are like super specialized in what they do, and so it would be like good to have like more background experience with it. So like I joined this database startup, right? And then basically my only database experience was CS143. So I mean it was like good. Like the other new grads who joined like my company this year, like one of them like did a master's, and then he did like database research in his master's degree in like a lab. And so like just coming in, he had like so much more like background knowledge, which like I mean I'm like picking it up too, right? Like I'm reading papers and stuff, but like if you know you're super interested in this one field and you want to join a startup in this one field, it's like probably helpful to like have more background knowledge in that. But I personally feel like joining a startup, like the main skill is more um like emotional intelligence or personality skill, just because like sometimes there's like it gets like really tough, or like there's not that much support for you. I felt like it really like forced me to like I don't know, just like you have to be like really okay with like just reaching out for help. Like people aren't like probably offering it because everyone's super busy, but you kind of just have to like pull it out of yourself.
Another skill that I think that you don't really learn in college, because mainly, so like in college in all of your classes and stuff, you do use libraries and things like that, but like they're almost always open source libraries and they have like amazing documentation. But like when you start working full time, that amazing documentation doesn't always exist, right? So like one of the things that you will eventually have to do anyway is like look through the code to figure out what's going on. And like learning how to read code efficiently is like not a skill that you come out of college with. So I don't know, like I during my first internship tried to like put it off for as long as I could, and I just like tried to look for documentation, like ask for help and stuff. But then I like quickly realized that like you do need to like know how to read code efficiently. So yeah, like I would say that once you start working full time, like just like go into the code. Don't like waste too much time looking for documentation and stuff. Like even if it's there, great, but like if it's not there, like I would suggest that you just look at the code and like learn how to read code fast.
Yeah, actually, I think if you we talk about if you go to a startup, like it's easier to be like that diversified skill set or like a generalized one. But if you really know like what you want to do, like if you really know that like for example, like I want to be a front end engineer that like specializes in using React or something, then like maybe going to a startup honestly isn't the best thing. Like if you really just want to be React, because there's so many engineers out there, right? And we see all the job postings for like looking specifically for a React developer, right? They don't care about everything else that I've picked up for my startup, right? They care about my React skill set. So I mean, there is some merit to just finally honing in on one particular skill if you really know you want to do it, right? But you know, coming out of, like Karen said, coming out of school, we're all generalized unless like you did some many number of side projects that like really honed in some really important skills that you really liked. But in my case, like I didn't really do side projects, and I kind of knew I wanted to do backend stuff, but like I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. So at least for me going to startup, I was able to experience a lot of different things. So.
Just as a quick extension question to this previous question, because it seems like, you know, of course, there's no one size fits all for like startup experiences. So all of you guys have had different experiences, but Karen has mentioned that for her startup coming in, requires a very specialized skill set because their company is very specialized. And for Matt, you feel like you've gotten a wide variety of experiences working at your startup at Confluent. And so for you guys, do you feel that for a small company like startup, like are you able to, if you had the choice, would you be able to choose to work on a more variety of like tech stack, whatever? Or do you feel like you get bucketed into forced to work on either a wide variety of things or a very specialized skill set?
Cool. Yeah. So I'll elaborate. So I feel like our team's like product is like super specialized because it's like a database, and like mainly I was bringing it up for like the point of that like coming in, some people may have like super like a lot of background experience on that, which is like good. And then if you don't, it's like also okay, but you just have to like ramp up. But I think even though our product is like super specialized, like since we're a startup, I actually do get to like touch like a lot of the system and like work on like a lot of like really different projects, because like there's like a bunch of different stuff you can work on. Like right now I'm working on like query performance, so basically speeding up our query engine. So that's like super low level stuff, like literally like cache hit, cache miss. I did like a assembly instruction profile to like see where the time was going, like in the assembly instructions. So like I had to remind myself what LEAQ means again. So cool. And then right now I'm working on performance, but other stuff I've worked on is like query warnings. So like when you issue like a SQL query, like we'll give you a warning if you're like looking for like some column in a table that doesn't exist. but yeah, I guess I just wanted to flesh out that like it can be like a super specific like domain product, but at a startup you still have to have like a really wide like repertoire of stuff that you're like willing to work on, just because like there's like so much to work on. And then basically like at least for me, I feel like our product is really big, but it's like not big enough to split into teams. So then it's like this whole team still has to own the whole query engine. So basically ramping up is trying to like get familiar with like all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I think my experience compared to Karen's, I think I may approach it more with like a generalized thing, because Confluent, we like Rockset has one great product, right? It's like the query engine, right, Karen?
Yeah, we have like
Yeah.
one
Yeah, for
feature.
Confluent, like we have our own version of Kafka servers. Like we have all these other layers that we've built on top of it, which we call like Confluent Platform. And then we also have like a cloud offering. So just like in terms of the number of teams that my company has versus Karen's, like we have multiple backend teams, whereas Karen is the backend team, or like Karen and her. How big is your team, Karen? Like 4 people, 5?
Oh no, we have like 8 people now.
Oh, 8. Okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
like you're 8 people for your backend product. Like my team for my feature in Kafka that we're implementing, we're like 10 people alone, and we're one of the 3 backend teams that's working on Kafka as a whole. But because we're all working on Kafka, I get to dip into all these other teams to kind of learn what they're doing, because we need to cooperate with them, right? So just because my company's bigger, I feel like I get more of a chance to generalize more because I have to interact with so many other teams, right? Sahil's going to be joining Confluent, and his team works on backend for like a lot of the Kubernetes services. So I had to go and talk to his team a lot because I need to coordinate with their team and my team to like get our features to mesh together. So that's why I was able to really focus on like this generalization thing. I still have to focus in a lot on my feature, which also does like the cache hit, cache misses, stuff like that. Like basically in the parallel lab, when you do CS33, you're revisiting all of that crap. Maybe not OMP specifically, but like a lot of low level stuff, right? You have to worry about the page cache and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I think kind of just you'll get this at big companies too, I'm sure, because you have to work with everyone has to work with another team at some point, and that's where your generalization comes in.
Yeah, also like talk for like a different standpoint, I guess. In small companies, you do work on more specialized like theory, but you're using like open source stuff because, like Matt said before, they don't have the resources to like build everything ground up, and there's still like reason to build everything ground up either. But in big companies, like they often have everything built ground up because they have like they need to support like large scale and stuff, right? So overall, I feel like the stuff that you work on at a startup is more transferable to larger companies than the stuff that you might learn at a bigger company, because like oftentimes you're using like a very specialized like framework or a very specialized like system or like way of doing things, which is not the case in small companies.
One way I'm thinking about it is like big companies, you have a broader range of possible things to do. Like at Google, you could do like AI, you could do like front end apps, you could do, like travel and like really complex algorithms like deep database stuff. Like if you switch teams, you can do you have the possibility of all those things. But each individual team deals with a smaller part of the product. Like at a startup, you might be like more narrow in like a startup that just does databases, or my startup is just kind of simple Chrome extension web app. And so I'm not going to, like, if someone came to my startup, they can't really like go do ML or complex database stuff. So it's but you get more of a breadth on the specific team you're on. So, and I think yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you for the answers. That was really comprehensive from all of you guys. Comprehensive answer from all of you guys. But I wanted to integrate the next audience question into a more personal question for you guys. You guys have talked a lot about like the sort of skill sets that you guys are developing at the company, from like what kind of skill set you needed to come into the company, and then now like what sort of projects you guys are working on, and what you're getting out of them. The next question is, with these skills that you're developing from your company and your work, what is your long-term plan? Maybe over like 10, 15, 20 years? How do these skills and what you're learning right now fit into your long-term plan? And do you feel like your experiences now are the best fit for your long-term plan?
Yeah, I'm going to be a Twitch streamer in like 5 months, so this isn't really pertaining.
What game are you gonna stream, Matt?
Anything and everything.
We're all getting laid off
So
very soon.
he's very generalized approach.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Well, going back, how's this fit into
So who's gonna answer the question?
yeah. To me, when I think of like the senior engineers on my team, or at least the engineers who I consider have been there for a while, which is like, I guess only 1.5 to 2 years at this point. I think of like what makes them, like, in my opinion, a really good engineer. And it's like they just have a lot of knowledge about all the different kind of aspects of our product, and they have understanding of like how everything kind of ties together as a whole for our company, whether it's like how our feature is going to integrate with Kafka as a whole or something like that. And sure, it's like you can have that understanding there, but like there's also a lot of theory behind it too that they also understand, that they inherently know to look for, right? Like one thing that I've never experienced in school is like sometimes when you're like reading from disk, there's actually like a limit on the number of input output operations that you can actually do. And AWS, they'll actually throttle you if you try to go too hard on that. So just like having understanding of that's my goal right now. Just like, this is the first job out of college. I just want to be able to like get those experiences under my belt and kind of develop this understanding of our product and the challenges engineering wise that we face, because these are like real issues. Maybe they might not come up exactly this way in the future at my next job, but these are always things to consider, right? Like network bandwidth, IO bandwidth, page caching, right? Like these things that we probably learned in school but didn't actually realize and had to apply it because we never applied it on like a project or homework or anything like that. So I guess that's my goal right now, just kind of leveling up, to put it in like summing it up.
Yeah, this is like a hard question for me because like I don't really know what I want to do in the future. So yeah, like Matt said, I guess like I do want to be a better software engineer, and like there are a lot of skills that tie into this. But yeah, like I do think that it's important that like everyone takes time to, I guess, figure out where their futures, or like what exactly they want to do in their future, because it's always like better to take like actionable steps towards your goal rather than just kind of like flail around and like hope and like just go wherever you end up. Like, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, it's a hard question to answer.
Yeah.
I feel that.
Yeah, it's pretty big question. I think for me, I got really into effective altruism, which is the idea that like how do you have the most impact in your life. So that's kind of what I want to do. Just how do I have a big impact? But early in my career, but it's impact over my entire life. So early in my career, that's why I'm focusing on growth. So it's like short-term personal growth, long-term social impact. And because in the future I can turn skills, leadership, general tech skills into like whatever I find to be like most impactful. So just gathering things I can use throughout my life. And I think like those type of skills and productivity, they like compound the same way money does. So hence like I'm willing to give up money to get it.
Cool. So I feel like my answer is pretty similar to Matt's. So I feel like my goals like right now for the next few years is to like grow and become like a really good software engineer. So my team stack is like C++. So like specifically, I feel like I'd want to become a really, really good like low-level backend C++ engineer, which just requires like, I feel like understanding like the theory behind computers pretty well. Because we like our two like founding engineers on my team, they're kind of like that. They're like wizards. So it would be cool to be really good like that. And then after that, I feel like I'd probably want to transition to like in like engineering manager role, maybe, just because like I feel like that would be cool to like be able to kind of like share your experience as like a developer after you've grown a lot and like help other engineers grow, because yeah, I'm also interested in just like that like kind of interpersonal growth and like working with people more that way. So that's my goals.
You guys, oh yeah. Did anyone else want to add something to the answer? No, those are all really good answers. It's definitely a very, very personal question. Thank you guys for answering it. But yeah, long-term plans are hard to talk about. In terms of like, yeah, okay, we'll move on to the next question. So with your long-term plan now, right? I'm sure like a lot of people are thinking similarly to you guys. Like, how can I make the most impact? How can I learn the most right now so that in the future I'm set up as best as possible? For these people, it might be like freshmen, sophomores, juniors, or seniors. How do you recommend they go forward in like this startup space or even big company space to like achieve these goals?
I think if you're a freshman or a sophomore right now, when you're looking for internships, I think it's important to use the internships as your kind of trial run of working at that type of company. The goal of where I picked where my internships were was honestly just to like get a different feel of what different types of companies were. Obviously, after my freshman year, I was just thankful for anything, which is why I ended up at DNTG. But then after that, right, then I guess after sophomore year, I was still just kind of thankful that I got AT&T. But after junior year, I think that's when all your recruiting gets a lot easier. So I felt like after my junior year, I really wanted to get an experience with like a large tech company, like one of the big four, what number are we saying now? Big five, big four, something like that.
Dang.
But I don't know. But
Right,
I mean, that's what I wanted to
Dang.
right? And then like after that, when I was looking for an internship after my senior year, like I had Google on my resume, so I didn't really want to go back to like a larger company. I felt like it just wouldn't, I guess, improve my resume, well, first of all, but also there was like a work environment that I never experienced, which is why I ended up picking Confluent. So this looping back to the original point, I think if you're a freshman or sophomore, like obviously if you have like it'll be hard to find internships when you're that young, but it's not impossible, and just chalk and blast to take what you can get. But maybe like when you're in your junior year or in your senior year, that's where you can, I think, try to hunt for the experience that you haven't had yet, because ultimately, like, you're probably going to be interviewing anyways for your full-time position. Like, even if you do get a return offer, you probably should keep interviewing. So like that, at that point, that's where you can bring all your experiences together and really make a decision on like what you think you want for your full-time experience after that.
My advice to like people who just want to be an engineer, is just like take every opportunity to learn, because like motivation is very perishable. Like you can't, if you wake up and say, I'm going to make a personal project, or I'm going to make a personal website, I'll do it tomorrow though. Like tomorrow comes or you're not going to do it. Like just every time get motivation or a reason to try and learn something, take it and think and try and make things easier for yourself in the long term. So like I think a good example is like the CS32, CS33 like GDB debugger. Like I didn't learn how to do it till like the end of the quarter and I really needed it. But if I just learned it in like that first few weeks, it would have saved me so much time throughout the quarter. Right. So do stuff like that, figure out like, hey, how do I best set up like Node.js or something, like try and take all these opportunities to make yourself more productive in the future, and then as for like internships, definitely approach it like, how do I explore different companies, explore different fields? So I think like going back to the same company several years in a row, it might be better to, try different sizes of companies, or if you're interested in a particular industry, a particular field, do.
Well, so I would say that if you want to be a software engineer wizard, then an important thing to do is pay attention in all of your classes. And like, so I'm coming from the perspective of like wanting to be a backend engineer, working on system stuff, like classes like M151B, basically like all the like classes 111 that explain like how a computer works, like all of that is like super useful. Make sure you're like really trying to learn and stuff, because like one day you're gonna be working on something at work and be like, oh yeah, that sounds like familiar, and then it was like something you learned in class. So I think that's important. And also like what helped me a lot with finding opportunities at startups was Greylock Tech Fair, cute product placement. So it's like this tech fair that's run by Greylock, which is like this venture capital backing firm. So basically they like give money to a lot of startups, and then every summer in San Francisco they have like a huge job fair with all the startups that they back. So that's actually where I met Rockset, because I had like never heard of them until I met them there. And yeah, there's like a lot of really cool startups there, like Robinhood and like Airbnb,
Confluent and Rubrik.
Rubrik, like everything is there. So I would really recommend going to that. Signups are like usually like April. I don't know if they're having it this year, like in person, but yeah.
Does anyone have anything to add on to advice for students? Okay. So I'm going to go back to some audience questions. So Alex asks, is it easier to find work at a large company or startup right out of school?
So as someone who so when I was in my last year, I was applying for a lot of startups. And I would say it's probably easier to get a job at a large company, because the startups you want to work for usually just hire senior engineers. And so there's, and the word startup like encompasses so many types of companies, and like finding a really good startup is very difficult. It's very difficult because people who work at Facebook, people who work at Google, like generally what the company's about, but a no-name company with 50 people, like nothing about. So it's like you have to apply to get really good startups. You basically have to meet them. You basically have to interview with them and like understand their culture, because like that's the only judge you have, like besides the press release they have on their websites. Like it's different for like large scale startups, but like when I say startup, I usually mean like smaller companies, and like those are really hard to know anything about. And so large companies have like more huge new grad classes and are willing to invest years in people. But a startup that needs something done, senior engineers or nothing kind of thing sometimes.
To kind of add on to that, I'd say that like most startups that are backed by like good VC firms like Sequoia or like Greylock or Anderson Horowitz or what have you, those are all like as hard to get in or harder to get in than like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, like all those companies. But on the other hand, that might not matter, because the things that they're working on might be like more interesting to you. So like, even though like it might be harder in theory to get into, like if you are interested in what they're working on, like you might be better at like doing those interviews, right? So like it's a balance, the trade-offs.
Okay, I think that pretty much answers the question. Yeah, that's super fair. So as a follow-up question, I guess, like Jorge, you mentioned like a lot of like the different types of startups. Like the word startup encompasses so many different types of companies. Do you guys want to sort of give like a quick, brief rundown of like what you would consider the main categories of startups, and like maybe give like a bit of your own personal opinion on each category and what the pros and cons are? Maybe we should have started with this, but okay.
Wait, can you repeat that really quick?
Yeah.
I think the four of us as panelists, I think we covered three of the, well, I would say like three categories, because you have Jorge, who it's just him and his co-founder,
Yeah.
and they're busting it all
Nervous
out on their own
laughter from Jorge.
and being wizards while they're at it. Then you have Karen's company, which is growing but still in double digits, and then you have Gopi and my company, which are over 1,000 employees now. So I don't know, maybe we can each.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like a
think
company is not a startup just because it's private.
What?
A
Yeah,
company is
technically
not a startup
Gopi
just
and,
because it's private. Like
yeah, Rubrik
I
and
guess like
Confluent are still considered
yeah,
startups
like
because we're still
Rubrik,
private.
Confluent, like Lyft, Airbnb, I'd say, like, and like Cruise. I'd say they're all like mid-sized companies,
it's
not
like a
Well,
not startups.
spectrum, and it's a little
Yeah.
closer to startup than
Lyft is not a startup anymore.
Wait, let's go
Okay,
from
that's true. Lyft
Rubrik to
IPO.
Jorge startup.
Okay.
Like this.
Okay,
Wait,
largest.
okay, wait, but like, can you repeat the question though?
No, just
Oh yeah.
like talk about it, bro.
The question was, so there's this, the word startup encompasses so many different companies, like large cap companies, mid cap, small cap, and then like also like basically like 10 people startups, and then like super small, like I just created this startup. And so like I guess like that's like a super general overview, but like for you guys, like what do you believe the main categories are that you would break it up into? And like what are the pros and cons of like each? Because we've been speaking generally about startups as a sweeping like generalization, but like clearly like all of these companies have their pros and cons in terms of the scale they work at, the opportunities you'll get to work at on like at these sort of companies. There's like more factors besides just the size of the company. It's also like how much funds the company has, how much talent they have. Yeah.
Okay, I see.
I'm gonna pass it on to you guys now. The baton is yours.
Yeah, I think number of people is the best. So I think it's like in my spectrum of startup, it's like you founded your own company, you're like an early employee at a company that you may or may not succeed yet, and then you're at a 30 to 50 person company where you're still talking to the founders, and then you're at under like 200 people, so you get to look at a sense of what's going on at the company's like just growing is the idea, and they're probably going to succeed at that point. And then you have these bigger companies who have just like really made it and are just like scaling up into the thousands. And that's, I think, that the conception. And then like, so as you move along the spectrum, you probably get like I think the equity compensation, like bringing money into it, it's, I don't want to bring money into it. We're just gonna talk about learning. I think, I don't know. What do you guys think? Like, well, how would you? So number of people. How do you guys?
Yeah. So like in terms of number of people, right? I feel like when I'm reflecting on this, like with me working at Confluent, we have about 150 to 200 engineers, something like that. I feel like we split the difference of working at some place like Karen's and working at, say, Google, because I actually am still, well, one of the co-founders is actually on my team, so like I could say that I still like can have face-to-face interaction with like a co-founder, but there's also like a broad enough scope of engineers that like I feel like I am part of a much larger company where like I definitely don't know everyone's name, and I know maybe like a quarter of all the people, like, can maybe interact with fewer. So I had another thought, but I'm losing it. Okay, maybe I'll stop talking for now.
Yeah, I guess like with the medium-sized company or like like a bigger startup like Rubrik or Confluent, like stability is a much, or like you're it's much more stable. Like you're probably not going to like the so in order for a company to get to that point, the idea is like probably pretty solid. So like they're not gonna like fire people because the idea is bad and the company is dying. But on the other hand, if you join the company at like a later stage, then like you do get less equity, so there's that to consider. But like in my opinion, I would say that joining a mid-sized company that's like not too mid-sized is like the sweet spot. Like if you're like Karen's joining Rockset, and like I feel like no, like what I'm saying is that like when you join Rockset, like all the information you had about Rockset was just like what you could get from talking to them, right?
True. It was very YOLO.
Yeah. So like if you join like a mid-sized company that's like a little bit bigger than Rockset, it's like not as YOLO, but it's like YOLO enough that you like have some of the perks of a smaller company.
Yeah. So oh, sorry.
You can
Wait.
go.
Okay.
To
My
add
bad.
for Gopi and my experience though, like Gopi and I guess we can consider we have the 8-hour workday. I definitely work more than 8 at the moment, but
I also did. Yeah.
but like I mean, I'm not ever worried that I'm going to need to go into lockdown or anything, or I'm also not making my own hours like Jorge does. So like I mean, in terms of work environment, right, or like what you probably could expect, I guess my workday can be seen as very typical. Where, yeah.
Cool. So I'm gonna jump in now. Yeah, I feel like Rockset is like more of like a small startup, and then in terms of deciding to join, like I feel like yeah, I didn't have like that many like data points about like what the company like was like, or like what they were gonna be like in the future, because like at that stage everything is like changing a lot. But I think for me the most important thing was like seeing like the background of the like leadership and kind of like founding engineers there. So basically, yeah, the CEO, CTO, and founding engineers like all were previously at Facebook, and they had like led some really big projects there. So like our director was like, I mean not our director, a CEO was director at Facebook for like their big like databases like org. And like so because of that, I felt like it seemed like the leadership there had like a lot of like good relevant experience. And then also like considering that I had like really enjoyed my experience at Facebook, I felt like the culture at Rockset would like probably be like at least somewhat similar. And like I knew I liked it, so that was good. And in terms of just like working hours, I feel like generally it's like pretty similar to um just like working at like a normal company, like a bigger company. But I feel like there are times where it's like, oh yeah, like you'll probably have to like work some weekends or work late sometimes, which is like I guess kind of what everyone does.
Yeah, something else to add is it's like so the types of companies I named. Like the hardest one to get into out of college is the like mid-size, like Karen-sized companies that are like slightly smaller, because like you're interviewing for a company that like because this company will change at that scale, will change so fast, and you're as a new grad you'll be interviewing like a year early. So like some of them don't even hire new grads for that reason, and then like a year later they might be doing something different. They might have pivoted, you know, they might. So I think that like I remember I was I was applying for a startup, like a 15-person startup, and I asked them like, oh, what do you guys think you'll be in a year? And like the recruiter got like insulted. Like I asked about her weight or something, and she was like, "You can't ask a startup that. Like, go educate yourself about startups. Like like this is not how it's gonna work."
F.
So yeah, I think that. So as a new grad, like the mid-sized companies uh, are a good bet too. And like founding your own company if you can do it, I think it's a great idea.
Does anyone else want to add to this question? Okay. We do have another audience question. Actually, before we move to this audience question, I wanted to ask you guys another question from our panel, which is in this time with like coronavirus, right? Like, how do you feel working at a startup, which may be like a little less stable than, for example, a large company?
I think the stability thing's overrated. Like I don't think you should worry about it. Like if you're successful enough to like actually have the decision between do I work for a small company, a big company, I think you're probably in a good enough position that you can get a job during even a recession. Like I remember doing in like one of the YC talks, he's like, it can feel really anxious like starting a company and like feeling like a failure. But like think about what's really on the line here. You know, if my company failed, I'd go get a job. And I think so. I'm not really like if my company failed, like I think I could still get a job in this economy. So I think it's not a big deal.
I agree with Jorge. Like, if you think about like the worst case scenario for, like, I guess like most of us, because we're not that old, is that like if we get fired from our jobs, and even if we can get another job, we can just like stay at home for like a few months and like apply to more jobs. So it's not like we're like at that age where it's not like weird to stay at home for longer. But yeah, I don't know. Like stability is, or yeah, like getting fired is not like that big of a risk. But also, I would say that in terms of how likely or unlikely startups are to get startups are to like undergo layoffs and stuff, um like really small companies that have like a lot of like funding and like a good runway are probably not going to get that much affected at all by the coronavirus. But like larger companies that like depend on revenue and stuff will get more affected because revenue is going to go down. But like if you're completely burning your money right now anyway, like the recession is not going to do anything to you. So yeah,
I think it's actually impossible to really give a straightforward answer on this because it all depends on your financial situation. First of all, like if you are really needing to be in work, then yeah, then honestly, maybe startup isn't the way to go. Or I mean, it also just depends on what your company is doing, right? We all saw that Lyft laid off about 1,000 employees yesterday, and I don't know how many of them were engineers, but I mean, they probably thought Lyft was doing well. They had gone public, right? But it's just like because of the circumstances for coronavirus, right? No one's using rideshare right now, so I think it's kind of impossible to answer like on how stable you think your company is going to be, or like what level of stability is like the minimum threshold that you require, because like that's all personal too.
Those are definitely very good answers. We're gonna pivot, like huge pivot right now, back to audience questions. So this question is, are there any CS or non-CS courses that you would recommend to broaden your knowledge while at UCLA? Probably the context is to prepare yourself for like a startup life or like what you want to do.
So I think it's good to like in terms of CS courses to like try to get like a breadth of like electives and like try a bunch of stuff, because like I think most people, including me when I was in school, like you're not like really sure what you're like interested in or like what kind of like domain of CS like you want to be working in. So I think taking those electives is actually like a really good way to like both learn more and then see what you enjoy. And then if there's ones that you enjoy, then like you should like try to dive deeper, like maybe like do some side projects with it, like do research with a prof on something related, read papers, like that kind of stuff. So I think, Yeah, like for me, most of the like experience that helped me with like joining a startup and like figuring out what I like to do was just like through CS electives.
I think, I, I think CS. I think trying to broaden your knowledge with courses is a little overrated. I think the you can get way more out of like extracurricular activities, doing internships, trying to do side projects, personal growth, so doing just clubs outside of CS. Um, like college is really good for exploration of interests, meeting people. People don't buy their time, so it's good to start a company with people. You can find great marketers and coders who will work for free. And so I think you should make the best of your courses, but I think the focus should definitely be outside. And you can do Coursera courses online, learn specific skills in the future.
My answer is probably a little bit both of Karen and Jorge's. If a course definitely seems interesting, you should take it. And if you know like you're interested in a specific field, you should definitely take a course. But like I said now, like I do a lot of Kubernetes work, but like there is no course for that in school, and that's something that I might have been able to pick up on Coursera or just like on a side project. So I don't know. It's hard to say because like every company also they focus on different things, right? And every different type of role focuses on different things. So in terms of like specific courses to take at UCLA, I'm actually I've always held the UCLA curriculum in pretty high regard. I think they actually do a lot of a pretty good scope of courses to get your general backbone of understanding of like computer science theory up to like a good standard. So just going off of that, like for your tech breadth or like your electives, if something interests you, definitely take it. And then yeah, if there's anything else that you need to pick up along the way when you start working, you'll pick it up there. So
Yeah, like kind of like what Matt said. Like when it comes down to it, it's very unlikely that the work that you'll be doing is like exactly a progression of what you do in your classes. So you'll have to like relearn stuff anyways. So I'd say just take what interests you.
Does anyone have something to add to that? Okay.
Cool. Actually, yeah, I could add a little bit. I mean, when I started my master's, I had the intention of taking a lot of distributed systems courses or courses related to like that aspect to kind of strengthen my back-end engineering skills. And then I ended up dropping out of school because I thought like the industry work that I was doing. I mean, what you learn in industry versus like is practical, right? Versus what you learn in school is theoretical. So sure, Kubernetes might be outdated in like 5 years or something like that, but the theory that you develop in school is probably going to persist. So it just depends. You'll pick it all up eventually, right?
Okay. Thank you guys for that answer. So we've gotten a couple other audience questions, but some of them are like very personalized for like Jorge specifically in terms of like creating your own startup. I wanted to just ask the audience right now, like, do you guys have any general questions you still want to tackle right now? Feel free to post it in the chat and I'll get to those first. Wait like 10 seconds here. Let me see what's up. Okay, so we have one. So do you guys have any advice on how to learn faster? Or do you just become better at learning new frameworks the more you do it?
For me, I think it's the latter. I think if once you kind of like read about something and use it a bit, like you have that experience like kind of stored away in the back of your head, and then when you approach a new framework, sometimes it just like kind of ties in and you can connect the two a little bit better, or like take some points from one and try to apply them onto this new thing you're learning. right? I think one analogy might be like if you're learning a new programming language. I don't know if everyone's taken 131, but I think 131 is great. It actually covers like a lot of different programming languages, and just like on like a shallow surface, but it gets you to understand like how those things work. So I'm not the most familiar with like functional programming, but because I had to do like the OCaml project and the Lisp project back in 131, I'm fairly confident that, you know, if I was at work and for some strange reason they came to me and was like, hey, you need to do, I don't know, what's another functional programming language, or we'll go back to OCaml, like you got to implement something in OCaml for whatever odd reason, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure like I could pick it up again. The same thing goes for like learning new programming languages. Like I mentioned I had to learn Golang this summer, but Golang looks like C++ and has a lot of concurrency things that are very similar to Java in the way. So, you know, like you just, the more you accumulate in knowledge, the more you can tie it back to what you've already learned.
Yeah, like you read the fundamental, like having good fundamentals, it's really valuable. Like if you understand exactly how, you know, for loops and like HTTP requests work, like that works on like all server languages, right? And so, and like a lot of patterns you'll see, so like when you learn a new language, they'll be like, oh, it's like this in Python, or it's like, oh, it's this in JavaScript, or something like that. So you'll have like as you learn frameworks, you'll get like this apparatus that you can like latch things to like learn things much faster. And you'll deal with error logs better, like the better you get in Bash, and the more you understand about that kind of stuff. Some specific things that I do that I'm not sure if they will be helpful for everyone is I like watching videos as like introductions to topics. And so just like get a quick sense of like what's possible, what it looks like. And then I like dive in and try and do it. I like doing like courses and like just watching those really fast. And I also like taking notes on code snippets. So like I have a markdown editor open on my computer all the time, and I just put quick code snippets there of how do you quickly set up a server in Express, or how do you fetch data in JavaScript, how do you do simple machine learning in Python. And so I can quickly look there if I know something, and I don't have to look up the syntax. So it's kind of like a cache of my knowledge, and I find that really useful. But yeah.
Okay, cool, awesome. We do have a couple more audience questions, but out of the respect for you guys' time as the panelists, I wanted to end here. So thank you guys all for your time. I know you guys are extremely busy with your startups and probably have a lot of work to do after this, but yeah, thank you again for volunteering to help co-host this. I wanted to also say thank you to everyone who came out in the audience. I hope you guys learned something special. I hope everybody's families and friends are doing well in this time. There's a lot of things that are happening right now, and people are calling me out in the audience section for not answering their questions. So I wanted to leave this meeting open after 7:30 for you guys to just sort of like continue answering questions through the chat. Maybe also like answer open, but I'm going to turn off the recording now. And so, yeah, thank you. Never hesitate to reach out to UPE for support for everyone in the audience. And thank you again.